Henry Louis Wallas murdered 11 women before his March 1994 arrest in Charlotte. He was dubbed the Charlotte Strangler and Taco Bell Serial Unaliver because he had met or connected with most of his victims while working at a fast food chain he was the manager of. 10 of the victims were his friends or acquaintances, including 3 of the women worked at the restaurant Taco Bell, and 1 was the roommate of his girlfriend. Former Detective Gary McFadden said, Wallas would form a friendship or establish a trust with his victims before he would take their lives. The victims felt comfortable with him because he portrayed himself as a big brother, or more as a good friend. One of the Wallas victims, Shauna Hawk, who worked at Taco Bell, was unalived by Wallas. Her life was taken by someone who she considered to be her friend. Wallas was also her manager at Taco Bell and attended her funeral. In the final days before his arrest, he murdered 3 women in a span of 4 days, and 2 of these women lived in the same apartment complex. One of those women was Brandy Henderson. She was 18 years old and living with her boyfriend at the time. The 2 had recently welcomed their newborn son. That evening, after her boyfriend went to work, she was on the phone with her cousin when Wallas showed up at her apartment, and she invited him in, saying, "Lock the door behind you." Her cousin George Burnell said he didn't know who he was at the time, but didn't worry because it seemed like she trusted him. That same night, Wallas raped and unalived Brandy while she held her son. Wallas also tied a pair of shorts around the baby's neck to stop his crying, according to the investigators, but the baby survived. Wallas was also arrested on March 12, 1994, the same day the body of his final victim was discovered. Shauna Hawk's mother, a victim of Wallas, says she believes that the police missed obvious connections because of the race of her daughter and status of Wallas's victims. There was no level of caring and obvious misconnections. She said that her daughter was blatantly ignored. Wallas told police he started having violent fantasies of dominating women after he witnessed a gang rape at the age of 8. At the age of 16, he attempted his first raping. It was a friend's younger sister. Eventually, he started having rough intercourse with women of the night street workers, he said. He joined the U.S. Navy in 1985 at the age of 20 and married a high school classmate while on leave. The marriage was shortly lived. Wallas committed his first raping in 1987 in Seattle, where he was stationed. The Navy honorably discharged him in 1992 after he was caught stealing, and then he returned home to South Carolina. Most people who spoke of Wallas, the Taco Bell manager, stated he was a good person. After his arrest, one of the victim's mother says she found out about his arrest on TV, followed by his photo, and she collapsed with such force and shock to the floor. She hit her head and started bleeding. She was in disbelief. Wallas was sentenced January 1997 to death for 9 murders, rape, robbery, and unwanted intercourse offenses. In 1998, he married a former prison nurse in a ceremony at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, where he remains on death row.